Hello and welcome to episode number 21 of the Nasty Metal Podcast. This one is gonna be, again, more slightly shorter one. Again, not a whole lot of big topics, but I will dive into at least to what's kind of going on with the channel and why Metaltober was absent basically this year. And again, Metaltober was definitely something I did at least for the whole entire month of October, and why I was absent this year. Either way, this one's gonna be at least not too long. We'll see. Anyways, though, before I really get into any of those topics, it's time to actually dive into the scheduling for at least these next 2 weeks, or what I might have planned for at least these next 2 weeks when it comes to at least mostly also album reviews. Even though definitely there will be still plenty of album of the week episodes. The thing is, this is November. We're already pretty much close to the end of the year anyways. It's again next month is December. That will be it. So we'll see how much long lasts for at least for content until I decide to take a break, though. But let me get into at least what's been kind of scheduled here for reviews again, or at least what's the scheduling for these next 2 weeks. So again, I've already released my for this coming Monday, for what will be released for episode number 136 of Album of the Week, is of course going to be a spotlight on Diver Madman from Ozzy Osbourne, which has pretty much reached its 40th anniversary. There will be at least only a Friday review, like I stated in my review for Emissaries, the 2021 Summer Tour EP. I don't know why I have an issue saying that. I basically stated that the Wednesday review was only going to be back for at least that week. It's been kind of taking a hiatus for at least some months. Who knows for how long until I bring back fully the Wednesday reviews. But for sure next week there's going to be a Friday review, and it's hopefully going to be for Violence Reimagined from Cannibal Corpse. Then, of course, that following week, for that following Monday's Album of the Week episode, which would be episode number 137, is going to be a spotlight on Burning Leather from Oz, which is pretty much reaching its 10th anniversary. And then that week's Friday review might end up being, for all we know, Sermons of the Sinner from KK's Priest. That's what I have planned, and that's probably going to be the final album review for a while, until January of 2022, basically. Because from there on, I will be working on just re-listening to every single album from this year, so I can be able to come up with a definitive end of the year list, basically, for December. I know I'm using the word basically, but right now it's a shoot the shit. I'm not reading off a script, so I'm not really picking and choosing what words to reuse or use within these videos. So if you have a nitpick about that, that's your issue, not mine. Still, that's basically what's on the menu there, basically. What we got what we have, or at least what I have for content. But there it is. Those are going to be the final 2 album reviews for this channel for at least of the year 2021, until I bring back album reviews for 2022. So there it is. Violence Reimagined from Cannibal Corpse and Sermons of the Sinner from KK's Priest. There you go, folks. But there'll be still plenty of Album of the Week episodes into at least December, until I take a break into at least a little bit of January before I bring back Album of the Week episodes. But that's it. So content's going to be very much little during those, at least here for the rest of November and into December. Okay, so before we really get into any more serious topics for this one, let me definitely bring up on, or at least give you an understanding or explain why Metaltober was absent for at least the channel here in this year. For one, I didn't have a whole lot of, technically I just ran blank with what sort of ideas, even though I ran with a lot of great ideas for last year's Metaltober month, but I just didn't have enough really, other than maybe there was still a few ideas I had in the tank. But I think if anything, since it's probably best for right now that I leave those ideas left for next year, because I'm hoping on bringing Metaltober back to this channel for at least 2022. So that's pretty much right now. It's just the reason it was absent is because of I just didn't really have enough time to really put more effort into really putting a month for Metaltober. And for one, two, is there was a lot of other sort of things outside of my outside of my being, basically, that I can just a lot of personal stuff too. It was not what it was. I don't want to really go into any sort of big explaining on why, but it's probably best left there. So I just didn't have any sort of time to put together any sort of cool things for at least for a Metaltober for my channel here for the year 2021. So I know you might think that I just half-assed explained it, but I'm giving you my right now what I feel easy about the best explanation I can give you. Again, it's what I had to work with. So there we go. Everything was just out of my hands for at least for the most part of October. But again, you still got plenty of content, so you can't really at least you can't feel like you've been cheated or anything. I still gave you plenty. And I'm still giving you plenty into at least into December until I decide to take my little break. So there we go. All right, let me get into at least the more, I guess you can say, the more serious topic here. And it's one of those that just came out of the blue. And it involves a death that we had just learned about at least a few weeks ago, at least a few days ago, actually some days ago. That is, but it's not for a musician or any singer, or even at times even for a wrestler or anything. Anyone that I'd be, any of you might even completely recognize, even though you will recognize it. So that's not for a musician or anyone. It's actually for probably one of the more well-respected, I guess you can say, journalists, guy who would, or even somebody who had been a writer for even part of Kerrang! Magazine for at least into like the 80s and whatnot. But that is, of course, Malcolm Dome, which is one of those that completely kind of surprised me there, because I'm not like that. I've never really looked into much of his personal sort of, if he had any sort of health issues, but still, it was one of those I was a little bit surprised by, because for when I was really growing into, or just really getting into at least metal music in my infant days, basically, when you would, at least for like the old sort of documentary stuff, I think like Heavy, the Story of Metal documentary that VH1 Classics had put out, or any of the ones for documentaries on Black Sabbath or Judas Priest, or even any sort of metal documentary, even one for like Napalm Death. Malcolm Dome was always featured on many of those. And he's still, whenever chance he had at least gotten to do on, let's say, write-ups for any sort of album or anything, he did. Because again, he basically helped really give a lot of recognition to a lot of younger bands. Basically, he did what someone like, for example, Jeff Barton was for the new wave for British heavy metal movement, and so. Every one of them, he was at the center of it. He's actually the one that pretty much coined the genre thrash metal. He's one that coined it, basically. He came up with the name, and it was all out of a review for Fistful of Metal from Anthrax. So he came up with the name thrash metal that ended up becoming one of the more dominating metal genres in that sort of mid to late 80s, and at times even into at least the early 90s. And even to this day, with its resurgence, it still has dominated. So he came up with the name, and it was all, again, a review for Fistful of Metal. Everyone, again, it's funny as to how everyone considers Metallica being one of the first thrash metal bands, but nobody was calling them thrash metal yet. It's just that the band that now that many people tend to be on the fence about would be Anthrax, but they were the first band that was ever sort of considered thrash metal. And it's one of the most ironic things, but again, it was Malcolm Dome. He came up with the term and everything for them. And from there on, it was a term, there was a name that ended up getting used from then to Metallica, to Slayer, to even Megadeth, even other bands like DRI, and Exodus, Testament. I think even maybe Possessed might have been considered thrash for a little while there, but even though they always got considered more, or nowadays they are looked at as the godfathers of death metal. But you look at that early sort of scene, and when that term thrash metal was being used, it was being used for certain bands, but not every one of them. But nowadays, it does get slept onto most of those bands. But that's just one of the more interesting things. And again, it's one of those, I think, big accolades you can give to Malcolm Dome. But he very much a legacy there. But the thing is, though, when I found out when he had died, because apparently he had died on October 29th. But they didn't announce his death until November 1st. So it's really interesting how that, I guess they kept it a little bit, which is understandable. Still, when it came out, because he was only 66 years old. So when that happened, I was like, shit, I also got plenty of at least albums or even reissues with liner notes that were or at least little mini reviews from him, basically, ones that he had written. And I actually went through plenty of the ones that I can look through many of my collection, and basically written down all the ones that he had that I've got that where he did a lot of the liner notes for, and so, or at least what they used for at least of his sort of reviews or even write-ups, whatever, and used them as the write-ups or the liner notes in the booklets for some of those reissues. But the ones that I was able to come across would be, again, for his review of March of the Saint in the 2006 Rock Candy remaster, his write-up for Technical Ecstasy in the 2016 reissue. His write-up was even used for the Bow Wow, the 2009 Rock Candy remaster. He provided the liner notes to, of course, the Budgie, the MCA years set, even to the complete Blue Sky albums from Derringer, the MCA years from Tigers of Pantang, I Rule the Ruins from Warlock, and plenty of my Motorhead deluxe editions, again, for like Overkill, Bomber, Iron Fist, Another Perfect Day, Rock and Roll, because again, he was one of the biggest advocates for Motorhead. I guess he championed Motorhead. Same thing he did with like Saxon and Merciful Fate and some of those guys. You know, he a sense of him working for Kerrang! Magazine, and since him really being the one that really was really pushing for the sort of heavy metal stuff, he those front covers of those magazines was all his suggestions. So he tried to really put forward to those bands. He wanted to put those bands forward on to at least for Kerrang! Magazine. That's when Kerrang! Magazine was actually, or I think they meant something because of it. It was groundbreaking at the time, and I think, again, putting really forth to a lot of more younger bands and even ones that were still new and were still being raved about and were still being fan favorites. So, and again, since Kerrang! Magazine was a mainstream magazine publishing company, they weren't, it seemed like it was odd, I guess, for them, because they weren't big bands, again, to put on their magazine cover for, like, maybe, let's say, Venom, or let's say Wolf Hoffman of Accept, or even Blackie Lawless of Wasp, or let's say even King Diamond at time, or even Any Merciful Fate. It was like, but he wanted to kind of get those bands onto there and give them recognition, because again, it was different, it was new, and it was, and he knew that these are the bands that were going to get talked about, at least from the underground. And he wanted to put forth those bands and submit them to at least Kerrang! And even do reviews of some of those albums. So he was definitely at the forefront when it comes to that scene in the 80s. But again, he also provided the liner notes to, of course, the 2016 repertoire remaster of Assault and Battery from Rose Tattoo, and then, of course, to the 2015 Rock Candy remaster of the 1990 self-titled Vicious Rumors album, basically the third album. So that's all the sort of releases that I got that have got his liner notes, and he was very well spoken. He knew what he was talking about because he had been a part of that scene for a long time. So he definitely knew it. And again, he was one of those guys I always kind of was fascinated by. He was probably one of those I was a little bit inspired by, to even at times even be a sort of a writer for any sort of metal or even magazine company. I'm trying to be able, that's why I'm doing, that's why what my YouTube channel kind of is basically a video version of basically guys of basically what Malcolm Dome or even Jeff Barton, because they were always wanting to put forward to at least more obscure bands, even so still focusing on whatever the more established bands are putting out, but still also put a lot more focus on more newer and more obscure bands that weren't getting a lot of the recognition, or weren't being spotlighted on, weren't even being considered for any sort of talk or anything, basically just weren't getting the attention. And so that's why they, for their at least respective magazine publishers that they were a part of, they wanted to do that. They wanted to at least give attention to bands that weren't yet getting attention and should be getting attention, and see where that attention would get them if they got to be in one of those magazines, because since they were all being bought up by pretty much most of everybody, even ones who weren't completely following anything or even trying to go out and just really dig deep into the record stores to find anything that would be new or obscure or anything. That was their job, and they did it, and it led to a lot of some of those bands to where they are now. So that's what I kind of, in my eyes, with my YouTube channel, I want to do with any sort of these artists or whatnot. Doesn't matter if they are established or not established, I want to give at least attention to them. It shouldn't matter, but I want to do that because, again, it's always a great thing for a band who's already starting up to get some sort of attention or getting any sort of recognition. It's always great. So that's what has been one of the main ideas behind my channel, and in a way, you can definitely thank guys like Malcolm Dome and Jeff Barton, because they are the ones that kind of inspired me too for that. So it's one of those that just came as a shock and surprise, because again, I was always I had always admired Malcolm Dome's work. So it really kind of it's just a little sad. So I definitely wanted to dedicate some of this part of this episode to at least to Malcolm Dome. So rest in peace to Malcolm Dome. Definitely a very much still a well-respected figure in at least the rock and metal scene. So there we go. So where do I really go from here? I think that might be it. Again, you already know there's gonna be plenty of reviews coming up. There's still plenty of new M's coming out, but again, this is why I think it's better for me to stop at least for both Violence Reimagined and Sermons of the Sinner, because those are still the two more important albums I wanted to get to, and for one, they're the only ones that I guess right now are of the interest. I know there's still a lot of other good ones. I know Toledo Steel, a band I haven't really much followed, but they're releasing a new album, and there's still plenty of other ones that are releasing new albums. But really, I think if anything, I can't get to a lot of that within the time that I've got, so I will just stop at those two, and then from there on, I'll still work on Album of the Week episodes, but I will for sure will be more so focusing on what's going to be on my end of the year list. If I might do two, it depends on how many end of the year lists if I come up with. And I might only do one or two, who knows. But again, after those, is when the task comes to hand, and that's when I'll be coming up and will end up feeling what will be a definitive good end of the year list. So for this channel, so there we go. I hope all of you enjoyed. This is Heavy Thrasher saying I'm out, and I'll see y'all later. Take care, everyone.